Well, I'm starting a new series on joy today, and I think music is like that. Music sort of brings up that joy, and for me, the way that you played it was like meeting an old friend again. You know, I just sort of felt that music and so familiar to me, and you played it so beautifully. So thank you very much for that. It's lovely. So we're starting a new series, and I've sort of provisionally called it "Discovering the Well of Joy." Because, you know, I think joy can be a little elusive. Yet I think it's at the center, joy, of human experience. It's really the exaltation joy of what it means to be alive. You know, it's an exaltation of what it means to be alive. But I do think it does take a bit of mining to get to joy itself. We have to go through all the many layers that we hit before we get to joy. And when we do get there, and I did hit it when you were playing there, it just comes rushing up like oil in a well, that sort of thing. Sometimes you hit it on a random way, like when you're listening to that music, you know, or you fall in love. That is a great sort of driller of joy, is when you fall in love. I mean, you have joy for a long period of time. And then, or the birth of a child, or when someone succeeds in a way that brings about that joy and exaltation, the exaltation of the spirit that we call joy. It comes from the Middle English word joie, French as well, based on the Latin gaudeum, which really means to rejoice, and it has the joy has a concept in it, particularly the Latin word of gladness and delight. And I think that's lovely, that experience of gladness and delight. And there's a sense of it welling up within us as it's expressed. And when you look at the subject of joy, I think the first question that always comes up, is, what's the difference between happiness and joy? And I think that's worth looking at, the difference between happiness and joy. And it's interesting because happiness comes from a Norse root, the word hap, H-A-P-P. And that means luck or chance. And we get the words happenstance from that. And haphazard comes from the same root. So the pursuit of happiness is, it's an elusive quality, and there tends to be a lot of luck involved in happiness. Oswald Chambers, the sort of famous Christian writer, said, happiness depends on what happens. Joy does not. Which I think is interesting when we start to look at it. Happiness depends on what happens. Joy does not. And Rilke says, joy is inexpressibly more than happiness. Happiness befalls people. Happiness is fate, he says, while people cause joy to bloom inside themselves. Joy is plainly a good season for the heart. Joy is the ultimate achievement of which human beings are capable. I mean, isn't that amazing? It's not going to the moon or inventing something. Joy, Rilke says, is the ultimate achievement which human beings are capable. I mean, it's just to me, we should have joy, sort of, workshops looking at how you create joy, and, people research. What are you? I'm researching joy. How you actually get there, given that's it. Andrew Harvey, in his book Sacred Activism, says, the true task of life is to uncover this primordial joy in oneself and then live from its peace, from its energy, from its radiant purpose and embodied passion. He's great, Andrew. He has this wonderful sense of realness about it. And this, of course, demands a lifetime's commitment. Now, where's this beeping coming from? It's a car. Good. I just thought it might have been the sound system. It's not. It's the car. So we can include with joy sounds from outside now. So he says the true task of life is to uncover this primordial joy within oneself and then live from its peace, energy, and radiant purpose and embodied passion. This, of course, demands, he says, a lifetime's commitment to working with all the forces in oneself that occur. The sun of this joy becomes clear when all the forces, and especially those within our culture, when those things that don't believe in that joy is real and sometimes have a conscious agenda to destroy the manifestation, when we overcome that, then we get to joy. And he says that there are four ways on the journey to discover joy. Four things are required. I think it's quite interesting. If you're doing research, we're doing research into joy here right now. And he says the four things you have to do. First of all, you must accept that the deepest level possible, that ultimate reality is sourced from boundless joy. And, in the spiritual life, people do seem a bit miserable a lot of the time, especially if you go into a meditation room, They do seem a bit miserable. I had a cartoon that I use. I'm all right with this peace, but where is bliss, in the cartoon? And the fact of the matter is people can be miserable. And yet, at the deepest level is boundless joy. It's a great quote in the Bible where Jesus says, he says that Jesus went to the cross for the joy of life. He says joy was his fundamental driving factor. He was even willing to go to the cross for that. So you must accept at the deepest level the ultimate reality is that boundless joy. And secondly, he says you're called to do the rigorous work of understanding the shadows of your past and the psychological labor of clearing the clouds from your essential sun. That means you've really got to take a look. And I think that is true, and we'll come to these sort of areas later on. But you have to take a look at yourself. If you're not experiencing joy, you've got to ask the question why, and what are the things that are getting in the way of that. You've got to work on yourself, he says. Thirdly, you can't avoid that to which all the traditions, the spiritual traditions call. That's the uncompromising and calmly relentless spiritual work to align yourself to all circumstances as much as possible with the powers of divine light. There is an acceptance of circumstances that is required. You cannot fight what is coming your way. There's an acceptance of it. But he says with the powers of divine light. In what case, you're not just rolling over, but you do have to accept what's happening. And fourthly, he says, one must commit to the amazing and dangerous task of embodying and enacting divine truth in the world. As all spiritual traditions know, the greatest joy is only known by those who have not merely tasted divine truth, but have pledged themselves thusly. So he's really saying that, you've really got to commit spiritually. If you really want to experience that deep joy that is not happenstance, you've got to make that commitment. So he says that you've got to see that it's the ultimate reality. You've got to work religiously on yourself. You've got to you've got to uncompromisingly sort of align yourself with whatever circumstances and work on the spirituality. So, all these people, what they're really saying is that joy is, in fact, the ultimate reality. It is the bedrock of our experience of what it means to be a human being. It is deep down, when the sperm is sort of swimming along madly, there is joy there, Gets it, joy, and even the child in the expression of, there's joy, in that experience. And yet, joy does seem a bit elusive to all of us. We're not, what have you been smoking? Unless you're absolutely, there. We feel lucky when we experience it. And we therefore tend to merge it with the sort of ideal happiness. The happiness and joy, they sort of tend to get merged but that isn't the case, happiness and joy. What we're talking about here is something that is deep within us all. It's deep within us all, and it's not something ephemeral. It is a reality of human experience. And so we set ourselves the task of discovering that well within ourselves. And one of the first things I think we need to do is we need to discover the entrance to the well. Because, it all looks like it's paved over. When you look for joy, everything looks like it's exactly the same. It doesn't seem obvious as to where to go to experience that joy. So the first thing we have to do is discover, like an oil well, where is the entrance? Where is the trap door? Where do we start digging, to actually find that well? We've got to find the entrance to it. And the thing that hides it, the entrance, tends to be the feelings that we have on a day-to-day basis. Those are the clouds that hide the well of joy, the feelings that we have on a day-to-day basis. And the way that you get to the entrance, here we are, I'm going to tell you now. The way that you get to the entrance is by giving up, choosing what feelings we want to have and what feelings we don't want to have. You have to give up trying to work out what feelings we want to have and what feelings we don't want to have. When we're selective about what we're willing to experience, the focus of our attention tends to be working out what we want to feel and how to feel it. That's really what that's what we do our research on. It's not on, how to experience joy. What we do our research on is, what do I want to feel and how do I feel it? And then we steer ourselves towards the circumstances that give us the feelings that we want to have. It's all about how do we feel it. And that leads us to keeping an overview of our lives that looks at the weather generated by different circumstances, and we navigate our way into the sunny climes where we think we'll experience, good feelings. But the problem is that takes us away from what we're feeling right now. We don't necessarily want what we're feeling right now. We tend to think, no thanks. There must be a better feeling than this. And so I'm going to organize my life to get those better feelings. Which is why people drink and smoke dope and take, it's why they do it. Why do they do all that stuff? To feel better. I've used this quote before, but I'm going to use it again. But and it really fits here. The quote from Khalil Gibran, the prophet. He's talking about pain. And he says, "And could you keep your heart in wonder the daily miracles of your life, your pain would not seem less wondrous than your joy. And you would accept the seasons of your heart, even as you've always accepted the seasons that pass over the fields. And you would watch with serenity through the winters of your grief." When we look at the seasons going over the fields, we don't get attached to the fact that it's a horrible day. We just look out and think, oh, the weather's like this or the weather's like that. We just allow it to be. But, the seasons of our heart, we want to move them on. We don't want to be feeling this. No, thank you very much. But he says, if you could accept the seasons of your heart, as you accept the seasons that pass over the field, you would watch with serenity through the winters of your grief. When we don't discriminate between what we like feeling and what we don't like feeling, we choose to feel what we're feeling in the present moment. And that opens the entrance to the well of joy. That is the opening. We choose our feelings. We don't try to feel something else. We just go with what is going on at the moment. And when we do that, then suddenly we become okay with what we're feeling. We accept it completely. And with that acceptance comes a peace. The clouds part and we find ourselves at that opening to the well of joy. And it is only a possibility at this time. You know, when that opens, you know, when you accept what you're feeling and you do feel that peace, you just sense the possibility of joy. There is a serenity there, but you just sort of get a taste, a whiff of it, of joy. The moment I'm not suggesting you indulge in, you know, there's a difference between accepting what you're feeling and indulging in those feelings and also trying to push them away. That's not it. It's simply accepting it. We might be anxious or fearful about the future, or grief about something that's lost, or fearful about an event. But if we accept that anxiety, if we accept that grief and that fear, not in a way that tries to get rid of it, and not in a way that indulges it, but in just a way that recognizes it as a season that is just passing over our heart, we can watch with serenity that allows the clouds to clear, and suddenly the well of joy opens in front of us. And that entrance is characterized by the acceptance of the present moment. It's the acceptance of the present moment, a willingness to be there in the present moment, to be here and to embrace it. The present moment is the entrance. And anything, thoughts and feelings, emotions, that we allow to cloud our arrival at this present moment is also clouding our being able to open the well of joy. So, that's the entrance. That's how you work out the entrance. And once you've discovered the entrance itself, the next stage is to go deeper. You then descend down into the well of joy. Always that film, There Will Be Blood, which is all about, you know, drilling for oil and stuff. But you descend down, you make your way down. And the next question is, how do you go deeper? You're in that moment, the present moment, how do you go deeper? There is a great stanza in the Tao Te Ching, which is the Taoist scripture. And it gives such a huge clue as to how to go deeper. It says, "We join spokes together in a wheel, but it is the center hole that makes the wagon move. We shape clay in a pot, but it's the emptiness inside that holds whatever we want. We hammer wood for a house, but it is the inner space that makes it livable. We work with being, but non-being is what we use. We work with being, but non-being is what we use. So as we descend, and the way we descend within ourselves into the well of joy is when we begin to pass into the space of non-being. Being is what we're always doing all the time. Being is what I'm being, you know, I'm being now, you're being in your chair, and being is what we do all the time. Our life is a function of being. But to enter into non-being is to allow ourselves to become detached from all the notions of being and arrive within ourselves in a place of non-being. This is the center hole that makes the wagon work. This is the emptiness in the pot that holds what we want. It is the space within the house within which we live. And yet everybody says it's unreal. We say that only being is real. Only that which we can measure is real. Only that which we are conscious of is part of reality. But we do not acknowledge that, and here's the key thing, we don't acknowledge that capacity upon which we rely to experience consciousness. The non-being is the capacity that we rely on to experience consciousness. Now, it all seems a bit confused, this, but I always like to go to the Dalai Lama to explain these things. He does it very well, actually, in this book called The Good Heart. And this is what the Dalai Lama says about non-being, about just explaining what it is. And he says, what we mean, and he describes consciousness as the capacity to know, the actual latent consciousness itself. He says that is the capacity. What we mean by consciousness is that capacity by which we know or are aware. It is, in other words, consciousness, the activity or process of knowing itself. This is because, generally speaking, we associate consciousness with an external object, or with a pleasant or unpleasant sensation. That cardigan is grey. I am witnessing the greyness of that cardigan. You associate consciousness and being with a particular object. The sound of the horn outside. We traditionally, that is, whether we're thinking conceptually or simply having a sensory experience, awareness itself arises with the form or appearance of an object, like the horn. And as a result, we usually don't recognize consciousness as we don't recognize the object as distinct from the capacity upon which we are aware. In short, in our ordinary experience, the Dalai Lama says, experience of consciousness becomes caught up in the dualistic appearance of object and subject. We think of consciousness, in other words, we think of everything as being. But he's saying there's a capacity upon which we rely, that he calls consciousness, that is the capacity from which we know. And I'm suggesting that is non-being. So while maintaining a profound alertness, if you're capable to put a stop to the turbulence within the mind, all the thoughts and the things that we talked about at the entrance of the well of joy, the conceptual thought processes and thought patterns chasing after sensory experience, if you can put a stop to that, you can begin to perceive at a deeper level. Then it is possible, he says, to have a glimpse of the nature of the mind. Non-being is the nature of the mind. This is how it is possible to recognize the nature of consciousness in contrast to the consciousness that's linked to physical reality. So I'll say that line again because it describes non-being and being. This is how it's possible to recognize the nature of consciousness, non-being, in contrast to the consciousness that is linked to physical reality. So I'm suggesting we have to get to that place of non-being. This is part of descending into the well of joy. And this is the non-being that in another part of the Tao Te Ching, it refers to, the Tao Te Ching says, we work with being, but non-being is what we use. Non-being is what we use in being. And we therefore enter the well of joy by accepting the feelings we have and having the clouds that are hiding the entrance to joy, which is the present moment. So we recognize ourselves in the present moment, whatever we're feeling, and then we descend into that well through the acknowledgement of non-being. We go to a place within ourselves from which being is generated, that which gives us the capacity to experience. Now, this may sound complicated, but actually it is quite simple. But it does mean we have to take responsibility for the way that we experience life. We have to take responsibility for how we experience life. Most of the time, we're carried along by the tide. Some days it's good, some days not so much. We're floating around in this tide, and we flap our arms and we flail about trying to get ourselves to where we think the waters will be calmer in the sea. And in our pursuit of happiness, we try to stack the odds so that happiness is what we get. However, it's all completely arbitrary. The ocean is enormous and completely unpredictable. And yet we think we can make it work so that we feel that happiness. But if we decide to take responsibility for our experience, then we choose what we're feeling. We choose where we are in the ocean. Remember that bit where earlier on Andrew Hyde was talking about choosing circumstances. We choose our feelings. We choose where we are in the ocean, and we make it our home. Thich Nhat Hanh says, your true home is the present moment. You come home to the present moment. And that creates a stillness within us. We arrive in our exact location. We own it, not wanting to change it in any way, but receiving what it brings. And that opens the portal to the present moment, the entrance to the well of joy. So let's try it now. We're going to try and find the entrance to the well of joy. So you could do this with your eyes closed, Maybe close your eyes. See if you can locate what you're feeling. It might be confusion, boredom, when's he going to stop? Anxiety, sleepiness. Name the experience you're having. And now completely accept it. Not in a way that tries to get rid of it, but in a way that wholly embraces all aspects of the experience. The numbness in your bum, the heat, the light, the annoying neighbor, the breath in your lungs. Own it. And see if you can feel that entrance to the well appearing in yourself. That serenity opening up all around you. Being with that experience of the present moment. And as you descend into that entrance, see if you can arrive at that non-being. That capacity within you that enables you to experience. Not the experience itself, but the capacity. It has no characteristics. It is just an isness from which everything comes. It is the place from which all being comes, of which Jesus says, the kingdom of heaven is within you. The kingdom of heaven is non-being. And of which the Tao says, practice doing, practice non-being, practice non-doing, practice non-being, and everything will fall into place. This is where the seamless well of joy begins to appear. And we are going to look at how that non-being turns into that being of joy next week. In the Hindu tradition, joy is referred to as bliss. Krishnamurti wrote, happiness and pleasure you can buy in any market at a price. But bliss or joy you cannot buy for yourself or for another. Happiness and pleasure are time-binding. Only in total freedom does bliss exist. Pleasure, like happiness, you can seek and find in many ways, but they come and go. Bliss, that strange sense of joy, has no motive. You cannot possibly seek it. Once it is there, depending on the quality of your mind, it remains timeless, causeless, and a thing that is not measured by time. That's perfect, thank you. So we always just have an opportunity in our service for you to come back to us for anything that's been said or anything you've experienced. Sometimes we have a nice silence. There's no forcible sharing here. But if you have something that you'd like to contribute, we also give out this information that we do with the willingness to be wrong. So we're totally okay for people to disagree with what's being said, and that's totally part of the picture as well. But if anyone does have anything they'd like to say, yes, Myrna Ray.
Thank you. I came in to dance, and I call my work Dance Alive and the Joy of Movement. And I've been doing it for 30 years. And I've been sitting in the chair here for the last year, not sharing the joy of movement. And it's time for me to do that. So I want to get on the schedule. That's all I can say. That's where I'll start, I guess. But I could start today by just getting you to stand up in your chairs, get out of your chairs, and jump up like you do, and shake it out and let it go. Shake it out and let it go. Come on. Some of you are not shaking. Let's shake it. Shake it out and let it go. Thank you.
Myrna Ray. So I would like to give official permission for Myrna Ray at any time in any service to get up and do her dance, and for us not to think that's weird. And not to think, what's she doing? Why is she doing this? So you have this permission. Anyone that does think that's weird, that we know that they're the weird ones because we've made that decision. So Myrna Ray, thank you. Yeah, there is a joy of movement, which is fantastic.
We get stuck and rooted in these chairs.
Yes, that's right.
And it's amazing how even for somebody like me who's been doing it for 30 years is stuck in this chair.
Yes.
I don't believe it.
That's great. It's true, and we are very held here, we've had a couple of weeks where we've had some singing and movement and things like that, and we're all pretty, it's a bit cerebral and stuff like that.
I had 3,000 people moving at a holistic health conference.
Thank you.
And my last workshop...
No one can hear you on the internet, unfortunately, so yes, very good.
Anyway, I'd like to share my dance a lot.
Thank you, that's great, that's good. Thank you, yes. And Camille, that's great.
I want to back up Myrna Ray, who will be 90 in February. We should all be so joyous, right? Myrna Ray and I took insight seminars together. I think getting deeply into yourself to get that vulnerability really helps to get to joy also. Numerology, hypnosis, the Enneagram work, studying what your personality really is. I'm a 7, the party animal. It's easy for me. So I think this is a great subject matter. Thank you.
That's great, thank you. Anybody else? Yes. Here we are.
Hi, my name's Stephen. Pertaining to today's talk.
Yes, Stephen.
I really think it's important to be able to choose your feelings.
Yes.
But there's another step I didn't really hear today about that is, see if I can keep it together here. I have to, because thoughts create emotions.
Yes.
And feelings are emotions. Yeah. So what kind of thoughts I have, my perspective on whatever's happening, or especially from the past, learning, the way things are, my perspective on it determines what emotions I have about whatever is occurring in my own little reality. And so I have to actually watch my thinking and decide what kind of thoughts, benefit good emotions. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And, for me, that's why meditation is so important in arriving at that place of non-being. It's where the place of non-being is where we witness our thoughts. and then we choose, and there's that old thing about, thoughts create character and all that sort of business, but we witness it, and we choose which roads we want to go down. And I think that's really worth saying, Stephen, so thank you. Great. Anybody else? Yes, Maureen. If you're watching online, if you want to text, you can text, and we can actually see any questions that you have from online. Maureen.
I loved this message. A couple things. It made me laugh because on Saturday Night Live once, I don't know how many years ago, they had a joyologist on there.
The
She was, like,
joyologist.
slipping on the back of her chair. Anyhow, it was really cute. But no, I don't know if this is relevant for absolutely today, but I just thought it was, helpful in that before I came here, I was watching CBS Sunday Morning, and they were celebrating Clara Barton. And, Clara Barton founded the First Cross. And it came as a result, too, of helping soldiers in the Civil War. They didn't have nursing on the battlefield. But then she went a step further. All these soldiers were dying and missing. And so she wrote to President Abraham Lincoln to try to create a database of where these men were and women to help these grieving families. Anyway, her whole mantra was, kind of getting outside of yourself, but, to find your joy, she just said, help people. It was that simple. And I know all of us, we get lost in our own neurosis and concerns and anxiety in real life. But I always come back to that, and then you kind of get outside of whatever it is that is dragging you down, and then you approach things differently. But what a beautiful soul she was.
I think it's extremely helpful. The idea of getting outside yourself, that's great. Linda.
Another way of doing it, in a yoga group that I belong to, we have a concept called simple being as opposed to being something. And it's very much like non-being. You're not being anything, it's just simple being. And someone described it as the feeling of sitting on your porch in the beautiful sun on a Sunday morning drinking a cup of coffee. That simple being and just staying in that state where you have more chance to control your thoughts, and a way that we can access this non-being something state.
That's lovely. Thank you, Linda. I really appreciate that. Great. Well, thank you. I really appreciate people being willing. It's always a nervy thing to say something, but thank you. I really appreciate you doing that. We always go in this moment from the sublime to the ridiculous, because we now have our offertory.